Hi, thanks for coming. So my name is Mitchell Tilbrook. At the moment, I'm actually doing any Xamarin development. I'm actually doing Java Android development at the moment. Quiet you. So I recently started a startup called SeatFrog, and SeatFrog's business goal is to auction off unsold business class seats. So if you're on a flight and it's half an hour before it's going to go, you could upgrade for like, I don't know, $200 if you go into LAX. So compared to like economy, where you go cramps, you could get a bed where you can sleep for the whole like 19-hour flight. Anyway, so it's enough about me. So I'm going to get into what is Reactive UI and how it can help you deal with concurrency and the kind of event storm that apps tend to become after a bit. So I'm just going to go into like why you might want to use Reactive UI, then a little bit on Reactive Extensions, and I'm going to give like a little short demo about how to just get it started. Reactive UI has a few kind of gotchas that will kind of trip you up right at the beginning, but once you get past them, it becomes a lot easier. Then I've got a few ideas for challenges that you can try work on using React or any of the other technologies that the speakers have been mentioning today. So if you're all ready, let's get started. Love the picture. So why Reactive UI? So this is kind of a fictitious kind of callback hell that I've just kind of come up with here. So we've got some kind of like Git type API that we're trying to hit. So we want to grab the user. Then when we get the user come back, we're just going to be optimistic and assume that it totally works and there's no problems with this. So we're just going to immediately call like a repository endpoint and pass in the user object, and it just gets worse. Just callback after callback, and if you start having to deal with errors, it's just completely impossible. Just don't bother. It just becomes this absolute rage of callbacks everywhere. So the kind of dual, which is the kind of opposite that you do in Reactive UI, is to kind of declare what happens when things change, rather than when I do get the callback, I now need to do this, then this, then this, then this. So Reactive UI kind of forces you to write in a more declarative manner. So you say, when something happens, then do something. I don't care when, just whenever it happens, just you deal with that. So in here we just go, whenever the user wants to do something, that doesn't highlight very well, then go and execute some type of command, and it kind of verticalizes it and separates the concept of a callback and time. We'll kind of get into that as we go through. And I'm sure everyone's done things like this, like loading flags, where we want to perform like a login, so we flip the flag to true, so then the UI then displays like the dialog spinner. We perform the request, then we flip it back. And I don't know about you, but I've sometimes forgot to flip it in the right places, and then when you've got errors, what do you do then? Like, you have to put the flag in there as well. You have to remember that, okay, so I started here and it's false, and I got the error and it's true, and it's just painful. So your program becomes this like horrible like storm of just events bouncing around all over the place. I love this kind of diagram. So this is like all the events from inputs, APIs, user typing, touching buttons. It's just stuff bouncing around chaotically. So you've got mutability everywhere. You're having to set these flags, remember that you set them, keep track. You have to keep this all in your head. It's really painful, and I have better things to do than remember the entire application state of my program. So Reactive UI introduces this kind of concept of, you kind of introduce time into the equation. So you got all these like events, but we kind of like put them on like rails. So they're all kind of coming in. You got just numbers in this case. So the user's just pressing a button that emits numbers. So because we have a concept of time, we can kind of say that the bit in the purple, that's the world as it is now. Everything before kind of just comes in, and this kind of like purple shade just moves forwards with the latest kind of data that's come in from the user or the API or anything. I'm not sure why I put this here, but Reactive UI works pretty much anywhere you can run C#. So you use it in Xamarin Forms, Android, iOS, all the fun platforms. It's like I kind of need to talk about some of the thing. Actually, no, that's boring. Let's not talk about that. So Reactive UI uses these things called observables. So instead of having these events, that's what these little streams are. So we convert all the events into these observables. So the streams, in this case, these lines, are the observables, and we're just listening to the events. And the last thing that happened in any of these observables becomes the state of the world. We don't need to keep track of all these different things. That flag that we had to keep setting everywhere, that just kind of, as the world moves forward, it gets updated. So you have this concept of hot and cold observables. So a cold observable will only emit data when someone asks for it. So I kind of think of it as like an iceberg. So it's, you know it's there, but you don't see what's underneath until you actually look. And then hot observables are just emitting events constantly. Like if you're listening to like GPS data from the phone, it's just constantly coming at you. Just, you don't really have any control of it, so you just have to deal with it as it kind of comes. So I'm just going to give you a quick kind of intro as to what you need to get started. Yeah, so let's just get into that. Okay. So how does that look from up the back? Good? Readable? Excellent. Alright, so I'm not going to create a new project from scratch because it takes too long to download all the damn dependencies. I'm just going to close all this. Pretend you didn't see anything. Alright. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add ReactiveUI. ReactiveUI will pull in a whole bunch of dependencies. It's pretty modular, so there's lots of dependencies, but don't freak out too much. And I'm also using Foddy, which has already been mentioned today, and basically just gets rid of a whole heap of boilerplate. So we've got our project, we've installed our dependencies, so one of the first things I normally do is I come in here and I add this line here. You need to add, this is kind of just boilerplate for Reactive UI. Don't really worry too much about it, it's just, you just need it. Bigger? You lied to me before. Yeah, that's a shortcut for making it bigger. That doesn't work. Mac Shift Plus. Hooray! Success is ours. Alright, so we just need to add this line here. So this is kind of just to bootstrap our Reactive UI. So this is just a bootstrap class where I've just put all my kind of IOC stuff. So Reactive UI comes with a dependency injection, but let's not worry about that too much. This is just, again, boilerplate to set up the wiring between our views and our view models. So if we actually get into, so I've just got a really, really simple login page just to demonstrate. Oh, that's lovely. Let's pretend that didn't happen. Hopefully that doesn't break anything. Oh, that totally breaks everything. Load from autosave. Oh, wonderful. So I've got this really complex login field here. Super awesomes. Alright, so one of the first things you kind of need to get out at the very beginning is that your views will need to implement the iViewFor interface, and then you just pass in the type of your view model. And so we'll get to this stuff in a second. But every one of the view models needs to kind of implement this bootstrapping process. This is just a way of getting the view model and the view kind of married up. Again, this is just boilerplate. The fun starts here with the bind and the bind commands. So bind is just a way of hooking up the data coming from, in this case, so the email field. So we just pass in the view model because it's all like functional. And then we just need to say that we want to take the text from the email field and put it into the email property inside the view model. Same for the password text. And we can start to kind of pull data out from inside the view model back into the view. So we've got this kind of, we've got a flag that says that we can log in. So the idea is, so if we go into here, the idea is that we say, we use this kind of when anything that I mentioned briefly before. So we say, whenever the email and the password change, and this includes when the view is first loaded and we have empty fields, then we want to assert that the email and the password are not empty, and that the password is greater than 8 characters long, and then we just tell it to kind of expose this property. So we don't need to set the flags, we kind of just declare what are the conditions where the user should be able to log in. And whenever those conditions are true, we then set the is enabled to true. And if it's false, it disables the button. And I also have this little kind of loading dialog here, where we just kind of, while the app's making the request to do the login, we just kind of show a little text box saying that it's loading. And then we get to the commands. So commands just a way of tying the things like click events, where the user is engaging in something that you want to then trigger something to happen in the background. So in this case, we just want to take when the login is clicked, so ReactiveUI implicitly assumes that when we pass it a button, when we're passing a button to a command, that we want it to react on the click event, because it doesn't really make sense to do anything else in that case. So in here, we just got a simple kind of pseudo command for doing the login, and we can also say that even if the user somehow manages to enable the button, which they really shouldn't be able to do, we can say that whenever we can create this is an observable, so we can say whenever the can login is true, then you can run this. And we can also run stuff on the background thread. You have to be careful when running stuff on background threads, because ReactiveUI won't automatically marshal stuff back across the UI thread. You have to explicitly say what thread you want to be listening on. So in this case, we can say that while the login is running, then we can say that we are loading the login session. So if I've done this all correctly, we should have this here. So you can see that we can't click on the login button as soon as we start typing in, like, wonderful email address. Now we can click on it. And yeah, that's basically all you really need to get started, and it's a bit of theory. Yeah, beyond that, it's more just kind of, oh, there's a picture. It's more just kind of practicing until you reach this aha moment where just rainbows just come out. For me, even getting to that point took several hours of just finding sample code. And one of the challenges, if you're using Xamarin, is that the Intellisense is kind of broken. I say kind of broken, it's not really. There's just lots and lots and lots and lots of overloads to deal with the fact that C# really wasn't designed with this in mind. So there's kind of a bit of horribleness. So if we try and like put another parameter in here, actually I probably have to like do this. So if we just delete some stuff, probably have to go back to here. So so the difference between when any value is that when any can have nulls, whereas when any value I think can still have nulls, but it tries to get the value out of the object first. So in here we can see we've got 19 overloads. So we can subscribe to a whole bunch of properties. And so in this case we've got 7 things that we're interested in seeing what happens to them. And then the very last function takes 7 arguments and returns something. So the Intellisense kind of doesn't really know what to do with these, and you kind of have to sit there with like the docs on one screen and your ID on the other. But I don't know, once you get used to it, you get the rainbow. So who's using it? So Reactive UI kind of came out of GitHub, so they're using it quite a lot. Yeah, and so my challenges are, so I got a few friends that play lots of Dungeons and Dragons, and we usually have quite large groups, which means that there are lots and lots of monsters on the table, and it sometimes takes like the dungeon master, I don't know, about 15 minutes sometimes to roll the dice to see all the different attributes for the monsters. So it'd be good to like have, I don't know, an app that automatically rolled dice for like 20 monsters to see, I don't know, if you haven't played Dungeons & Dragons, it's just go look it up. But generally the idea is you roll dice to see what monsters are doing. If the monsters roll like a 1, then the monster is like looking out into like nowhere and like doesn't know that people are like stabbing it. The other thing is like listening to like the GPS data. So if I'm on the way back home and I'm walking past the shop or something, I don't know, you could kind of make up the data for this, I guess. Have the app kind of produce a notification, like tell me to buy milk or something. Or another GPS thing is like if I kind of leave work at like random times. My wife's always texting me, it's like, when are you leaving? Have you left yet? So it'd be nice to have an app that automatically just went, hey, look, you've walked up to Town Hall Station and you're now moving north. You must be on your way home. So it just automatically messages. It's like, hey, look, he's left. I just have to make it so she doesn't know it's an app telling her. Yeah. So here are some resources. So you've got the Reactive UI docs. So Jeff, who's around somewhere, there's Jeff. If there's anything missing from the docs, go ask Jeff. It's sort of been his job most of this year to do that. But he's quite busy. So another good site is these RX marbles, which I kind of stole some of the diagrams from. I think I'm going for a bit of a rant here. So this kind of describes like how you can kind of start to take disparate events and start to compose them. So we can see here we've got 20, 40, 60, and 1. Oh, it's a merge. So we take both these things and produce a single one here. That's kind of boring, so where's a more interesting one? Combine latest. So we can take multiple streams and start to combine the data in interesting ways. So we've got in here which is this nice kind of, we've got one stream eventing numbers, another one sending out letters, and we just kind of create a new one. We've kind of glued that data together. So if you want an idea for Reactive UI, just kind of look at this and think of how some of these types of things could probably help in some of the apps you're writing. Managed to go for a while, so I think I'll end it there. And if anyone has any more questions or wants to kind of get pick my brain a bit more on how to get started with Reactive UI, then come talk to me.